Welcome back to List Building with Maniacal Cackle. This event for New Year's Retribution 2, first event of the Malifaux World Series for this year, I'm doing list building, and so we're going through in detail for each round and looking at why I built the list that I did. So, for this round, we've got this map, and as with so many of the Vassal maps, it's very heavy on severe terrain. These forest patches, not only are there a lot of them, but they are absolutely massive, so that's the most defining feature of this board is the huge amount of severe terrain. So that's part of why I declared Molly, is she's very, very good at building crews that can make their way around terrain, as we'll see soon. I also declared Molly because of the pool, and I'm against Explorer Society, which I thought, well, she's pretty good in most of the matchups. And I just prayed that they wouldn't declare Nexus. So it's Break the Line with Breakthrough, Assassinate, Hidden Martyrs, Catch and Release, and Bait and Switch. Molly is pretty great at all of these. I think I've talked about it in the past. Bait and Switch is the only one I struggle with, and that's because it's probably better at crews that are better at moving your crews around, and also better at deleting the enemy crew from the board. So that one is usually a bit of a struggle, and in a pool with a breakthrough, then that's double reason that it's sometimes not a great thing to score. But the other four I feel quite comfortable scoring. Catch and Release, Krooligans instantly pretty much guaranteed scoring it, although it's a bit trickier against Nexus. Hidden Martyrs, you can go Archie and a Krooligan, or you can go Enslaved Spirit and Valedictorian, whatever. There's lots of combos that this crew has access to. Necrotic Machine and basically any model. So there's just tons of combos for Hidden Martyrs. The downside, of course, is if Molly's in line of sight, the enemy Martyrs can just kill themselves on Let's Rest, so that's a bit of the danger zone there. Assassinate, depending on build, it can be very good at scoring it. Dead Rider in particular is really, really good at kidnapping masters, but that's always a judgment call. You gotta wait to see what you're up against. And Nexus, most powerful Nexus 1 lists are very, very difficult to get Assassinate. Nexus 2, probably the biggest reason not to declare Nexus 2 into this pool and matchup is Assassinate is really on the table when you're talking Nexus 2. But Intrepid Emissary does make that really, really difficult, and Intrepid Emissary, outside of McMorning, we don't have that good of answers to Emissary in this faction. Breakthrough, it is a bit AP intensive, but I find that, Archie and a Krooligan can score it, Necrotic Machine and a Krooligan can score it, Manos, etc., as we'll see down below. So I considered a whole lot of lists, and so with the Nexus matchup, what I'm looking at is it's a pretty scary matchup, right? So here up top is my first list. This is the default list of what I wanted to declare in this pool. So Molly and Necrotic Machine is the base. Dead Rider and Archie are both 3 AP models that can start their activation engaged and still get an interact out, which is really, really good on Break the Line. They're both 3 AP beaters, so they can each make 3 attacks in activation. They're just very, very solid models, and you'll see them in most of my Molly lists because they work really well together. Also, Dead Rider adds a bunch of mobility to this list, which we'll come back to in a moment. Krooligan, you play Molly because you want to have a Krooligan in your list. So obviously I've got at least one Krooligan. When there is Catch and Release and Hidden Martyrs in a pool, I usually like to take 2 Krooligans, so that one can be the Catch and Release target and one can be the Hidden Martyrs target if I want to do that. I like to leave that option open. But for various reasons, I think this is a game where I'm going to need lots of Soul Stones. Assassinate's in the pool, so I might need Soul Stones to reduce damage on Molly. I might need it for penetrating the concealing of these huge amount of forests. And there's some suits that I might want to be stunning for as well. So double Krooligan, I think, is something that I'm usually looking to do when it's a really low stone build, which means that usually I'm not looking to brawl with Molly. Then for another model, you've got Valedictorian or Anna Lovelace, matchup dependent. two enslaved spirits to then help with mobility and AP, because basically the idea of this build is that it's very, very good at brawling. Dead Rider, Archie, and either Valedictorian or Anna Lovelace, very, very good in a fight. On top of that, because you've got these enslaved spirits, you can move Molly around the board, and then she's really, really powerful in a fight. And all up, I'd have a Whisper on Molly and 7 stones left to play with, so that she wouldn't have to worry about the concealing on this map. She can just stone through it. So that's kind of the idea of this build overall, is that it's really, really good in a straight-up fight, and this is the sort of list I'd take if my plan was to straight-up fight. However, I'm playing against Nexus. You don't win a straight-up fight against Nexus with virtually any crew, much less a Molly crew. If I throw Valedictorian or Anna Lovelace into the middle of a Nexus crew, they're going to die. They're going to get a Parasite, and then they're going to quickly die, and then they'll get more Parasites and be taking 2 irreducible damage per Parasite, which is just... you die way, way too fast if you're in a melee brawl. There's also a possibility to take Sloth over the Enslaved Spirits. The downside is you get less mobility for Molly, but you have more healing, you have more staying power. The heal is really, really powerful on Anna and Valedictorian. It gives them a lot more staying power. It can be pretty good on Archie, but typically he outranges Sloth, so I don't value it as much there. And of course, Sloth can make Valedictorian or Dead Rider fast, which is really, really powerful. So if you want to play Molly and this season, I think this is a good basic list to take, where you'd have these 8 models, and possibly you swap in Anna Lovelace or Sloth. One downside of this build that's worth mentioning that makes me consider Sloth is 8 models sometimes suffers from generating too many pass tokens, and Molly's an activation control master, so she doesn't like to lose that activation control from pass tokens, so it could be worth going with Sloth. So that's the list. I chose Molly with the hope that I would get to play a list like this, because it's so good at brawling. It's really good at Break the Line, because it's got plenty of AP with those Enslaved Spirits, not to mention all the other models. But I'm playing against Nexus, and I don't want to fight Nexus. I want to avoid Nexus. So let's look what else I've got. I did consider Molly 2, and one reason is Molly 2 is very good at avoiding a fight and just interacting. Her push models along and get a free interact at the end of it, even ignoring engagement, which is really good against those 2-inch engagement range nests. So Molly 2 could be really good, but the problem is there's 5 turns in the game, and I don't think you can play KG Molly 2 just trying to get ahead on points for 5 turns against the Nexus on standard deployment. Like, I think that by kind of end of turn 3, my crew would be so obliterated that he would be able to just run away with the game and get back into the game with his crew. So yeah, I think that's a tricky issue there. So no to Molly 2. Philip and the Nanny. Willpower duels are a real bane of Explorer Society in general, and especially Nexus. That boring conversation is so absolutely brutal to the Nexus crew. However, they get so many flips, they can just flip through it, and then again, if Philip and the Nanny has to be within that 6 inches of Nexus crew, and if you're within 6 inches of a Nexus crew, you're going to die. So I don't really like Philip and the Nanny for that. Carry On Emissary. So what I think is really, really good is ranged attacks. And so Carry On Emissary was on my consideration list, because he has a really good range attack. But then also Nexus is really good at tying people up in melee, which is the single biggest weakness of Carry On Emissary. So I think that's a no-go with him. Datsu Ba is an interesting one. Only an 8-inch range, can't be tied up in melee, and has a trigger that when she kills people, she turns them into Onryo summons. That's really, really good against Nexus, I think. But again, that falls into the same problem that Toshiro is going to have when I explain Toshiro in a moment, which is just that's really committing to the plan of sitting there and fighting Nexus in a straight-up brawl, which I think is the losing strategy, so that's why we're not doing it. Toshiro could summon Ashigaru, which help cover the Break the Line markers, and that helps give me a bit of sustainability, helps me stay in the fight longer. But again, that's a hold your ground brawl strategy against Nexus, which I don't really like. Yin, really, really good for the runaway and scheme plan, but Yin cannot start the activation engaged and still interact. And there are a lot of tricks around that, and I don't think that's the death of Yin. but due to how good the Cadmus crew is at tying models in engagement, I don't think it's the appropriate one for this matchup. Rogue Necromancy, funnily enough, one of the really, really good things about Rogue Necromancy here is you can go Projectile Vomit with the Necrotic Decay trigger, and you're a min-3 Eater at an 8-inch range, which is really, really good. It's the same thing that the Carrion Emissary has, but no gun, so you're in a lot better position in melee, and of course its melee attack is much, much, much better. And it's terrifying, and that's you'll notice that's true of 5 of my maybe models on the list. Terrifying, I think, is really, really good against Nexus, because while the husks are ruthless, the rest of the models aren't, and you're getting some really good value out of Terrifying. Another thing about the Rogue Necromancy is it can just kill the Intrepid Emissary from a distance, because that stat 7 defense on the Emissary is virtually impossible to get through, but you know who can get through it? The Rogue Necromancy who targets move. Projectile Vomit, though, absolutely terrible against the rest of the Nexus crew, because they can just pass damage along with We Are Legion, and you don't do the poison or the distracted if you're not doing the damage directly. So the crew can just completely negate Projectile Vomit, which annoys me to no end, but that's an issue there. Additionally, Rogue Necromancy, if he's going to use Necrotic Decay, that uses up 2 health, and the healing of a Molly crew, and even using his poison mechanic, is just not as good as a McMorning crew. So that's really something I'd look to do if I had declared McMorning, which I was considering for this matchup, except all the severe terrain stopped me. If I was playing McMorning, then going with a Rogue Necromancy adds a lot of power there, because you can heal it up as it's vomiting with the Necrotic Decay trigger and basically being a min-3 beater. So those are all models I considered, but for various reasons, like, they didn't match up, and you'll notice again the biggest theme is like, oh, I'm not that sold on sitting there trying to kill Nexus. I do think that I need the option of it, because there are a lot of Nexus builds, for instance, if he doesn't take Intrepid Emissary, where I can turn around and just kill his important models, and then the Nexus player loses. If Meredith dies before activating on turn 2, it's very, very favored for me to win, I think. But what if he takes the Intrepid Emissary build, where he just says, right, I have an invincible bubble, what's your answer? Well, to that, my answer is running away and winning the game, rather than trying to kill his models. So, what I've settled on is we might call this Classic Molly. This is essentially the format that I've taken, where basically it's Archie, Dead Rider, and Monos. And so these are 3 models with 3 AP each, who can make 3 attacks a turn each, or they can start the turn engaged and interact, or they can interact twice in a turn. All of these things are really, really valuable on Break the Line, especially against Nexus, where I'm expecting, for instance, some nests that I have to deal with, or whatever. I will have to do some killing. So all 3 of these models can swap dynamically between killing models and scoring points. And so that's why, for I guess what I'd call my classic Molly builds, as opposed to my new Brawl versions of Molly. So you'll see Archie, Dead Rider, Monos in the vast majority of my last 100 games or so. So that's a lot of power there. Monos has some extra things that made me go for this build, because this build, I think, works together, all these models working together really well. Monos has a gun, and again, ranged attacks against Nexus are just where it's at, because I don't want to go into that bubble. And that gun has AoE stagger, and Nexus is a bubble crew, so being able to AoE stagger them is really, really good. And in particular, the Intrepid Emissary has Willpower 5, which is the stat on Monos' gun, and it has a 2-inch range on its Take the Hit. But Monos' Pulse for Stagger has a 2-inch range. So basically what this is saying is, if he wants to take the Intrepid Emissary, I'm going to say, okay, but everyone gets staggered. That's anybody who wants to be covered by that Intrepid Emissary is being staggered by Monos. So that's an answer to Intrepid Emissary. If he doesn't take Intrepid Emissary, then my Dead Rider has the Reap trigger, which means that I can kidnap models if he doesn't take the Emissary. So I kind of have an answer to multiple Nexus builds here, which is really good. And I'm focusing mainly on Nexus 1, and I'll cover Nexus 2 at the end. Vincent, also really good. He has a range attack, which is really nice. He can one-shot summons, which is really, really good against Nexus 1 because of that horrible summon engine that's really, really rough. um, and he can. Um, Oh, and he has good stats, and actually stat 6 and stat 7, stat 6 defense, stat 7 willpower, provides a real challenge for Nexus, because Nexus is really, really good at punishing low stat. Like Archie, for instance, is so easy for Nexus to punish the nest. If Archie goes near a nest, the nest will just parasite him, and then he's done to a large extent. So that's something that all the rest of my models I've tried to take decent stats because they will struggle to actually hit me, which is landing their critical attacks. So yeah, Vincent I think offers a lot, and he ignores hard to wound, which means that he can potentially two-shot a nest, which will require stones. The biggest weakness of this build is after all of these models, I have 6 stones left, and I really, really, really want Whisper on Molly. My friend played a practice game with Vincent against Nexus, and he killed 6 models with Vincent over the course of the game. So that's 6 extra cards drawn with Vincent, potentially. So I think probably smarter players than myself would say they want the Whisper on Vincent. But I find Molly's turns get smoothed out so much by having the Whisper. It adds a lot of dynamicism to her, and it lets her pick which cards she's drawing. For instance, if she sees a 12 of crows, she's going to be like, right, I'm drawing that, so Vincent can do an exorcism later in the turn. So if I'm low on stones, I think I want the Whisper on Molly, so she can really abuse it. Also, I don't think Vincent's going to live to the end of the game, because he has to get within shooting range. So I don't think I'll get full value out of the Whisper. So I hope that makes sense why I built it that way. And now just some quick comments on Nexus 2. Nexus 2 I'm a little bit worried about because it's very, very difficult to prepare both for the possibility of what Nexus 2 brings to the table and what Nexus 1 brings to the table. So I've focused on Nexus 1 because I've kind of assumed that's what it is, because Assassinate being in the pool up here kind of indicates to me that probably not Nexus 2, and if it is, I can probably deal with that by going after Assassinate, unless they like going really hard on the Intrepid Emissary. I am really, really worried about Beeb and Calypso, because that's just a model that Rezzers in general are quite weak to. However, Molly can two-shot Calypso if it comes to it, so I have some answers to that. I don't think it's a very good answer, but it's better than nothing. Calypso's also weak to or immune to staggered rather, so I can't even stagger him with monos. So that's kind of highlighting to me that the biggest problem I can possibly have is that they're going to take Beeb and Calypso, which is probably a red flag that model needs a nerf, but that's an entirely different discussion. Yeah, so I hope this all makes sense, but when we make a crew, we have to also confirm that it is fairly coherent. One thing about Archie, Dead Rider, and Monos is that they all have fairly demanding TNs, and that's not something you could just put in any crew, but Molly with all her overwhelming card draw is really, really good, so I think that's fine. Kruligan requires places to teleport to, and we have Archie, Molly, and Necrotic Machine, and I have multiple plans for how those teleports might play out, so you might see that in the game coming up. So the Kruligan's got the support necessary for it. Vincent, he's going to struggle with these forests, but focus helps with that, so Molly's primary target for focus is Vincent, and that's a good thing to be mindful of, is only so many models can get Molly's focus because she has to discard a card, so Vincent's the primary, and then Monos as well, so that he can use his gun to bypass that. And then if I have focus to spare, which I doubt, it goes to the Dead Rider. But that's a good thing to check when building a Molly crew, is just making sure that you're not overdoing it demands on Molly for her handing out focus. Card discard wise, I need 1 for Archie, I need 1 for Kruligan, I need 1 for Molly's bonus action, sometimes 2. So that's 3 cards, possibly 3 for the TNs here. Noting the sleep is really demanding. Then I need another 1 for constructive criticism, so that's 4. So all up, probably about 7 or 8 cards just to get my crew to run correctly, which is a terrible idea in most crews, but I think with Molly I've even pushed it to 12 cards to be operating at full power before. And actually Vincent has to discard for rapid fire, so that's another card. So what this means is I'm just going to have to be really, really good at hand management, which is fine, because that's what Molly players do. So that's, I think that pretty much sums up a lot of my thoughts. I went through it a bit some parts had less detail, and I focused more on the final list this time than the individual models. I hope that is suitable. But yeah, let me know if people like this change or if you want to see something different next week.